Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Foul Boys Sports Podcast. My name is Jeff Bevelheimer, and joining me, as always, are the best gosh darn golly gee whizzing co-hosts in the game. First up, my boy, Mr. Gas Station Egg Sandwich Consumer, Steven.
Hello.
And secondly, last but not least, my boy, Mr. Midnight Rider, Gimli McGravy.
What do you say, son?
I would just like to clarify before we start, that was a very half-hearted Chuck Pagano impersonation that I was going for.
Well, I mean, it's not exactly what I was going for, but I appreciate it nonetheless. But, boyos, this past weekend was a very, very sad, disappointing, just depressing ending to all of our seasons.
You ain't kidding, man.
Yeah, it was a rough weekend, man.
It's not fun.
Especially for you, Jeffrey, Mr. 1-3 this weekend on predictions.
Oh, dude, I was feeling the underdogs, except for the Patriots because they're the Patriots. But, I was feeling the underdogs. I don't know what happened, man.
I took everyone at home, and I got my predictions 4-0. And let me tell you, it did not help with this terrible weekend of football.
3-1 for me for the second week in a row. I'm not going to be mad. I like consistency. Just wish the Cowboys could have won.
All right. Well, boys, let's take a look at these games here. First up, we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Colts losing at a score of 31-13. Steve, what do you think about this game?
This is one of the worst games I've ever. Anyways, so the Chiefs defense, I think that was probably the story of this game, right? Chiefs defense and the Colts offense. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mahomes was very impressive from a short passing standpoint. He made a lot of off-balance throws. He was pretty accurate, but that was to be expected, and I don't think he really did anything out of the norm. Like, I think his deep passing wasn't very impressive, but this Chiefs defense, I don't know what took so long the whole season, but they played some very tight man, got a lot of pressure. They didn't necessarily get a lot of sacks, but they pushed that Indianapolis line back and got a lot of batted balls. Nobody on the Colts wideout standpoint was getting open. And Bob Sutton called the game of his life, and in order to fight something like that, the Indianapolis Colts offense has to bounce back with fire and passion, and let me tell you, they did not do that.
Speaking of that, let me ask you a question here. What do you think exactly happened to the Colts offense? Do you think it was more of the Chiefs defense, performing at a high level, or was it the offensive shortcomings of the Colts?
Well, before I get into this, I do want to say that from a play-by-play standpoint, the Chiefs were playing at a high level. You can look at the Chiefs' stats all season when they're playing defense at home, 18 points per game. When on the road, they give up 35 points a game. They've not always been great. In fact, they've often been very bad. But in this game in particular, something was different because they legitimately did play very well.
They did.
But a game like this for the Indianapolis Colts is not necessarily unprecedented. Earlier this season, we went into Jacksonville against a team that was ice cold while we were razor hot, and the Colts offense was absolutely putrid. It didn't help that Ryan Kelly, our starting center, was out, but Jacksonville's defense played the game of its life. They have a lot of talented players on that Jacksonville team.
Right.
Calais Campbell was getting pressure in the middle, lots of batted balls, much like in this game. Nobody was getting open. Even T.Y. in that game, Jalen Ramsey was all over him, and Luck in the offense had no answer for it. And I think that that's indicative of why the Colts were able to be successful during this latter part of the season. Their schedule got significantly softer. They went from playing teams like the Patriots, per se, to teams like the Bills, Oakland, Jacksonville they beat once. And whenever you finally face a team that's of premier caliber and one that actually executes their talent level, I think things like this happen, especially in the cold with a dome team. And season's over. We couldn't adjust. The offense was putrid. Andrew Luck was off. We need better receivers. Eric Ebron, I was very disappointed in the performance that he had. Dropped some balls. Wasn't really getting open. Wasn't getting far enough down the field on a couple of his hitch routes. This was a terrible showing by the Indy offense.
Yeah, and like you said about keeping T.Y. Hilton in check, they kind of did so. I mean, he was held to 4 catches, 60 yards, and the touchdowns. Not exactly the high caliber stat line you'd expect to see from the receiver like Hilton.
A lot of that production, too, came in garbage time when the game was out of hand. And I have no idea how much of that was T.Y.'s ankle catching up to him. But
he did seem off in this game just about the whole time that I watched it.
That is a very good point, yeah.
It's the playoffs. You got to get...
Oh, you have to play at your top level, but after going through an entire season like that and fighting so hard to get there, it may have just been too much for him.
Especially in a game where it really seemed like Kansas City was doing all they could to try and get some momentum on our side, but, Luck would throw a ball in the dirt, Luck would get sacked, pressure coming up the middle from Chris Jones on one point getting a sack. Whenever we got the fumble recovery caused by Darius Leonard, Braden Smith just gets blown off the line. D Ford just hits Luck. Luck had no shot on that play. And, I think a big part of this was this offensive line by the Colts hadn't really been tested. I mean, as we talked about last week, they faced a lot of very talented people on that defensive line, but they weren't always playing up to their talent, that Texans defensive line. Jadeveon Clowney, he's very spotty. I mean, J.J. Watt's great, and Braden Smith actually handled him, but now you get a hungry Chiefs defense who has a lot of talented pass rushers.
And there's been a lot of shit talked about that group, too.
Yes.
They had a lot to prove coming into this game.
They really fucking wanted it.
And like I said earlier, they pushed back this line. Even if they weren't getting sacks, they were pushing back the line, getting that line in Andrew Luck's face, jumping up, batting balls down, disrupting plays, and Luck was shaken. Luck was visibly shaken.
You could tell.
Definitely. Absolutely. But, I mean, okay, so this performance by this Chiefs team is very good all around. The only thing is, it's Andy Reid in the postseason. You got to wonder, will he choke?
Well, he's got a damn fine opportunity to do it next week against Brady and Belichick.
Yes, he does. But I think that the Chiefs' offense was far less impressive in the second half. Don't get me wrong. They were still taking advantage of some terrible zone, which I'll talk about more at length later. But they didn't score. They didn't score as many points in the second half. It was, they gave up some turnovers, had some 3-and-outs, whereas in the first half, the Chiefs' offense was just unstoppable. And a lot of that had to do with complete dysfunction by the Indianapolis defense in this first half. You saw, I believe it was 5 offsides penalties throughout the entire game.
Right.
Just undisciplined. Darius Leonard, he may have had some very good tackles in this game and a forced fumble, but this first half by him, he was out of position in coverage. And Travis Kelce, let me tell you, he took advantage of a very weak zone. And he would turn a 10-yard gain even into like a 30-yard rugby play. I mean, we couldn't cover anyone with this weak zone. And I think a lot of teams this postseason struggled with the zone. And I think they're going to have to do something about that this offseason if we actually want to stop teams like the Chiefs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with Travis Kelce, he's just a player that has that type of skill where he's going to turn a modest, 5-yard slant play into an explosive 40-yard gain. That's just his game.
Especially if you're playing a lot of cover 2, he can really bust that seam up the middle.
Absolutely.
But back to the point about Andy Reid. They were not as impressive in the second half, and the Colts could have easily came back in this game if they showed any semblance of an offense whatsoever. And I don't think New England's going to have that same problem. I'm still not sold that Mahomes is the premier performer in the playoffs that everyone expects him and wants him to be. But he didn't show that he wasn't on the same hand. He had some very good plays in that first half. Just, inaccurate downfield throws, but still very impressive game. I thought his short passing, he looked like someone playing Madden. I mean, he was just rolling to the right and still hitting dimes on hitch routes.
And definitely, I mean, he does have a sort of, I don't know if you call it easy, especially at this point when they got to play New England, but he does have the home field advantage path through these playoffs, and that will alleviate some of the pressure for this young quarterback. But you got to wonder if Pat Mahomes is the real deal. Like, do you guys think he could be the next? Will this be a changing of the guard per se in this AFC Championship game?
I don't know if it'll be a changing of the guard right now, but I think certainly that Mahomes in the future is the real deal. I think that if he wasn't the real deal, there would have been a crumbling in this game, and he had nothing of the sort. He was extremely solid.
So, yeah, I mean, like, especially with this offensive production that Pat Mahomes and the rest of this Chiefs team has been putting up, you got to, especially going in next week, New England's got to be wondering how you slow down this offense.
Well, let me tell you, you can't play zone defense because they have so many talented playmakers with a great quarterback and a great play caller where zone isn't going to be able to get it done. You have to be able to create a lack of separation man-on-man with all of these playmakers. You have to get pressure up the middle. That's any quarterback. But you also have to be able to set the edge, be able to adjust for him scrambling outside the pockets. And you have to rattle him early. You have to be able to get pass rush and just pray that he doesn't make an Aaron Rodgers type throw because he has that talent, he has that arm strength, and he has the resume that he's done that. I mean, you look at some of the highlights he's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, what a fun, easy deep ball.
And he has a beautiful voice.
Oh, it's just wonderful.
The announcers were actually talking about that his voice was actually a big reason he was able to get those offsides. This is unconventional voice.
God, I hope that's true. That's amazing. Yeah, definitely sad for Colts fans, but there is a silver lining in that with this young core that there is a bright future ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can go into depth with this at another time, but we have a lot of cap space, a plethora of draft picks, and I think that if Ballard actually chooses to get aggressive this offseason, then I think that we can make a legitimate run next year if we get some better weapons. Luck having another year in that offense, but that's another story for another time.
Absolutely. And moving on to game 2 of this past weekend, Gimli, your boys fell short to the Los Angeles Rams at a score of 30-22. The curse stands true.
It's alive. And Garrett is going to get a 29-year extension this offseason. You can bet fucking money on it because Jerry Jones is a fucking bastard. You were right last week when you said he's the devil.
He is. But it's just more proof.
I mean, they got exposed on defense this week big time. We just could not handle Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers, and Dominican Sue. We just could not keep those guys at bay. And, I mean, it shows. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott was held to 47 yards and 1 touchdown off 20 attempts. That's just absolutely terrible. If you want to win this game, if you're Dallas, Ezekiel Elliott has to go off. He has to have bare minimum 120 yards for us to even have a chance in this game. Now, Dak Prescott showed me a lot. Like, he played a lot better than I thought he was. I mean, he left a lot on the table, a lot of throws on the table, but that's also Dak Prescott. That's just his style of play. He's going to roll out and try to be Superman and make these miraculous plays, but more often than not, it doesn't work out.
Definitely. I don't know if you remember last week, and going on that point of having Zeke be held in check, I don't know if you remember last week when I was saying that the Rams defense needs to hold Amari Cooper in check. And they did almost exactly that. They let him score a touchdown and get 65 yards off 6 receptions. But that touchdown came late in the game, where it was pretty much out of hand at that point. And, I mean, look at it. They couldn't get anything going on the ground with Zeke, and that just slows that Cowboys offense down so much, and it's just hard to find production out of anywhere else.
And then the biggest point with that is, like, the defense kept the offense of the Cowboys off the field. Like, they just could not stop the run game. That just ate the clock, and the next thing you know, it's down. And I mean, what did I say? They're not going to win this game if they get down by more than 1 score. That's just not the way that this team is built to play. They have to play solid defense, which they just absolutely shit the bed on this week. They could not. C.J. freaking Anderson. The corpse of C.J. Anderson shredded my defense for over 100 yards.
He definitely went off. I did not expect that coming in this game. I thought it was going to be the Todd Gurley show.
Yeah, I mean, if those numbers for Todd Gurley, which, I mean, he had 115, but, like, I would have expected Todd Gurley to have that kind of game, not C.J.
Absolutely.
Anderson.
He definitely came out of nowhere. And in a big spot, I mean, if he's going to perform anywhere, it's definitely in the postseason. And he came to play.
That's where you cash paychecks, baby.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that the lack of success, or the lack of success running the ball with Ezekiel Elliott is something that can be fixed when going up against an elite D like that whenever Travis Frederick comes back and Suafilo comes back?
Yeah.
Or do you think that line is just so talented this is something that would have happened regardless?
Now, if we had Travis Frederick in there, I think Suafilo would have done a lot better against those just absolute maulers on the inside. I mean, I like Connor Williams, don't get me wrong, but at this point in his career, he's not starting left guard material. I would rather have Lyle Collins scooted inside the guard and have him outside playing right tackle. But I'm not a coach, so what do I know? But I think, if we have Travis Frederick in this game, that helps out a lot. I mean, he is the captain of the offensive line, and I mean, we've been missing him all season. Like, Joe Looney did okay, and he did okay in this game, but okay just did not cut it.
Yeah, definitely. Going off to here, this Cowboys, do you think it was just the run defense that was way too weak, or was the Rams' attack too strong on the ground?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, they came out and they played fiery. I mean, you could tell they really wanted to get after it in this game. Like it's been predicted, all week, and the Cowboys are going to have a big game on the ground, and they just came out and said, "Nah, they're not."
No, the Rams took that for themselves.
Yeah,
and definitely, it was a theme of this weekend. Sort of these 1 and 2 seeds, these home teams, were coming out strong out the gates and just never looked back. So, moving on from that point, why do you guys think that Sean McVay is so damn popular? Like, I mean, it seems like if you just even look at this man from a mile away through a telescope, you can get a head coaching job in the NFL.
Well, what I can attest to personally is that whenever I saw Jared Goff play in his rookie year, and to his credit, he had one of the worst rosters in football in a long time. He had no playmakers, no legitimate playmakers. He did have Todd Gurley, but Todd Gurley was maligned behind a pitiful offensive line and a very good defensive division at that point. And that combination of things led to Jared Goff being one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen during his rookie year.
I mean, he looked like a straight-out bust.
Yes.
He's out there with the likes of Jamarcus Russell and all that.
Blaine Gabbert Part 2.
He was, anytime that he would get rushed, he would just shudder. And he's still, he's still not great when he's rushed.
No, absolutely not.
But, whenever a first-year head coach, a young offensive-minded coach comes in, and now they're in the NFC Championship game 2 years later after being horrible. What's not to like? I mean, he's been consistent. They've been getting better. They've put playmakers around him. And that offensive line has actually become one of the better offensive lines in football, starting whenever they signed Andrew Whitworth after Goff's rookie year. And, they were able to maul the pretty solid Cowboys defensive line, which is mainly on the edge, but they just had over 200 yards rushing in the NFC Divisional round, and that's not something that's easy to do.
No, the interior of our defensive line got absolutely exposed in this game. Malik Collins didn't play great. Williams, it was bad.
Yeah, going back to the point about Sean McVay, so why do you think it's him versus a coach that actually has proven himself in the postseason? I mean, at this point, Sean McVay is 1-1 in the postseason. And I don't want to sound too biased here, but I mean, Doug Peterson is like 4-1 in the playoffs. He's won a Super Bowl after 2 years.
I think it's just one of those things where it's the flavor of the month. I mean, you look at someone like Cliff Kingsbury, who just got hired in Arizona, who, he's a good-looking guy, offensive-minded guy, young guy, who actually wasn't even very good at Texas Tech?
Yes.
Yeah. He was not very good. Even though he had Pat Mahomes there at his school, he couldn't really muster together any great seasons. In fact, I believe he was fired because he had a losing season to close it out. But I just think it's one of those things where it's flavor of the month. I know Mike McCarthy, someone who has had postseason success, was someone who wanted to get a job in New York, but he was passed over in favor of Adam Gase, who was, fired from the Dolphins and had not a very good offense over there in Dolphin land. But it's the flavor of the month. We're very big on young offensive-minded coaches because we feel that nowadays, more than ever, this is an offensive league.
Yeah. Especially with all the rule changes and everything. I mean, it is an offensive-driven league. It's really hard to play good defense. So they just want to overload on offense and just try to, put up 50 points.
Absolutely. So I know that Los Angeles doesn't exactly put up the best home field advantage here, but and especially you saw if you watched the game.
Yeah, it was about a 50-50 mix in LA.
You heard a lot of Dallas fans there, which, I mean, I know Golf was at home, but like I just said, not a huge home field advantage. So do you guys think that Golf can continue to handle like a pressure like this?
Who knows? I mean, we haven't really seen enough of Golf to make one judgment over the other. My initial thought is I think that he's going to fold. But there's certainly enough talent on that Rams team where he could make it work. And with Sean McVay coaching him, maybe he can find a way, just give the run game, or maybe Goff can step up. Maybe he can finally learn to handle some rushers, because they're going to have rushers with Cam Jordan, Sheldon Rankins whenever they play in New Orleans. So
do you think this is a situation where McVay can maybe scheme Goff into success?
We possibly could see it, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be talent him into success and scheme him into success. But, Saints have been sloppy recently, so I could see them getting out to a big lead earlier.
All right, moving on to game number 3 here of this divisional round of the playoffs. We have the Los Angeles Chargers going to Foxborough to play the New England Patriots, coming up short at a score of 41-28.
Excuse me while I puke.
Oh, God, nobody wanted to see this.
Yeah, nobody wanted this.
But this is what everybody knew would happen, and unfortunately it did come true.
I will say I did not know this would happen. My Lord. I even said that I thought the Patriots weren't going to score a lot of points either way, and they must have listened to the Foul Boy Sports podcast last week, because they scored 35 points in the first half.
Belichick knows.
It was scary, man. I mean, Brady looked like he was 30 out there. I don't even know what else to say. He was perfect. I mean, maybe he didn't do a lot of deep passing, but man, he didn't have to. He was on the money. Edelman was getting open flawlessly. Chargers are another team that was playing heavy zone in that first half, and Brady was eating it up. We have to get rid of this zone. The Chargers have such a talented secondary where I think that they should realign their defense into something that can play more man, because nobody could stop Edelman. Nobody could stop Gronkowski. And Sony Michel had a wonderful game.
Oh, yeah, he did. 24 attempts for 129 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That man could not stay out of the end zone.
Go figure for me, who said that, he doesn't strike fear into the hearts of defenses,
Sony
He
Michel
certainly did this week.
must also be a fan of the Foul Boy Sports podcast. It's just true.
Which one of the biggest things, we talked about how the Colts might have had the best offensive line in football. But you look at this Patriots offensive line. Wow, Shaq Mason, I believe his name is Thomas, who was out on the at left tackle, who replaced Nate Solder. I mean, everyone is blocking well. I mean, they are just a monolith coming against that Chargers defense with some very talented players on it. Mebane is, he's still solid. And then you would think about like Melvin Gordon and Bosa, and they were moving those guys. Mm-hmm. And not just the offensive line, it was Mark Andrews, the fullback, and it was Rob Gronkowski was blocking great. Sony Michel just took advantage of some very good holes during this game, and so did James White as well. James White was also very big early in the short passing game and breaking off some good runs. But, I mean, this Patriots offense was unstoppable in this game. Yeah. I think, maybe a lot of that had to do with the home field advantage. I don't know if it's replicable, but for this one game, I was terrified of this Patriots offense.
Definitely. It's something that I saw was very impressive that this Patriots offensive line did, is they held a defense that last week had 7 sacks against the Baltimore Ravens to not a single one.
Yeah, I mean, the pass rush was non-existent. Brady was untouched throughout this game.
He threw a lot of short passes too, so he didn't really have time to set up.
Yeah, that's
a pass rush.
That's been a major focal point here in a lot of different talking circles, is that these quarterbacks are getting the ball out really quick.
Yes, that's one of the big things that Andrew Luck did in his resurgence this year. But, speaking of getting the ball out quick, one person who didn't really get the ball out quick in this game was Phillip Rivers. He didn't really take a lot of short passes, mainly because, the Patriots, as the announcers were saying, looked a lot like the Ravens this week. They were stacking the line really hard, not that 3-4. Playing a lot of strong man coverage. Chargers weren't really getting opens except for Mike Williams. Let me tell you, Mike Williams is a stud. He was making some very powerful catches in this game. But, man, it didn't matter because Phillip Rivers had no shot. I mean, this Patriots pass rush, which has been lackluster all season, wouldn't you know who won the pony? They have a pass rush in the postseason when it matters. Bill Belichick, of all people.
Of course.
Could you imagine?
How did we not see this one coming?
Yeah, of course, why wouldn't that be what happens? I mean, they didn't put up stellar numbers with 2 sacks, but, I mean, the pressure was there.
Well, if you watch the game, Trey Flowers, who's he's a free agent. He's due for a big contract this year. He was all over the place. He was unblockable on that Chargers offensive line, which the Chargers actually have a pretty solid offensive line, but my God, Bill Belichick just out-schemed him. This was a complete out-coaching. Anthony Lynn was completely outclassed by Belichick in this game.
You could definitely see the difference or the skill gap, I guess you could say, between these two coaches. And another interesting thing that this Patriots defense did is that they held Melvin Gordon to only 15 yards and a touchdown on 9 runs.
That's Patriots football. I mean, the Chargers, they couldn't really get the run established because they fell behind so quick. But even when they were, I mean, Melvin Gordon wasn't really doing anything behind that Chargers offensive line. And just, that's Bill Belichick football. He's always going to make an adjustment. He's always going to be able to get it together, especially with a bye week. Let me tell you, the Texans messed up when they lost late in the season and let the Patriots sneak into that bye week.
Yeah.
Wasn't that against the fucking Eagles?
Oh, you bet your ass it was against
the Eagles. It was against the Eagles.
Why are you laughing? You just helped out the evil empire, you son of a bitch.
Oh, I know. We didn't think it would come to that, but alas. Hey, we knocked them out last year, so we did our service.
Yeah. Before we move on from this game, I do just want to say one thing. Derwin James was I thought Derwin James was pretty impressive in this game. Not because, he held the Patriots under 41 points, because he certainly didn't. But any time that the Patriots were actually being stymied whenever it comes to their run offense, that had to do with Derwin being in the box and making plays. Other than that, the Patriots were carving them up.
James is an absolute stud.
He's a stud.
Yeah.
And I hope that this secondary will be able to get some better schemes in place in the future, because there's so much talent on that team that, if Philip Rivers is ever going to get deep postseason success, they need to do it. They really needed to do it this year, but
yeah. Speaking of that, I do have a couple points I want to bring up about these two quarterbacks here. Both actually have to do with their age. Do you guys think that Philip Rivers will get another shot at maybe getting a ring?
I mean, you can kind of feel momentum sliding away from Anthony Lynn, in my opinion, after watching this game. And I think that they really got exposed in that game whenever they were playing such soft zone. And if they're not going to be able to adjust their scheme in the future to the teams they're playing, then no, I do not think that Philip Rivers is going to get back to the dance.
I don't think he'll ever get to the dance in the first place.
Yeah.
Especially not if he has to go through it. Like, he is way too old to go through another head coaching change, which, I don't think that's going to happen, but...
Oh, yeah, there definitely won't be a coaching change.
No, not for at least another little bit.
No.
Yeah, it's a shame. Maybe in the league that he starts up with his massive progeny.
The thing that kills me, though, is that, this is such a talented roster. It's, one of the most complete top to bottom. They just didn't show up.
That just seems to be the point that everybody makes about these Chargers all the time. Is that they're so talented. You think they will put up a good game against somebody in the postseason, but it just doesn't happen.
I still believe they should have won this game from talent standpoint.
Absolutely. You look at on paper, they're much more talented than the Patriots, but it's the Patriots and Belichick.
Could you imagine if Bill had this roster instead of the Patriots roster?
I don't want to live in that nightmare. I don't want to live in that nightmare. Every year. Oh, God.
Not again.
Anyway, about this other quarterback, you might know him, Tom Brady. When do you guys think this so-called cliff is going to come for him? Or is it going to come? Is Brady going to play into his 70s? What's going to happen?
Nobody can predict this. I mean, Brady is the ultimate outlier. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. You ain't kidding.
There's playing late into your career. Well, there's playing late into your career. And then there's playing one of the best quarterbacks of all time late into your career. With the way he takes care of his body and everything he does to prepare and how well that system is in place, people don't understand how important it is to have continuity and a good system for a quarterback, and he's had it for, his entire career?
Basically, yeah.
With a head coach that's willing to study and adapt and is a genius.
Dude,
even if his arm falls off, I still think they're going to be able to scheme him small ball.
He's going to drink enough water to grow back another one.
Yeah, it's just scary to think of how much longer he can go. And hey, it really is impressive when you take a step back and you really look at it. Anyway, moving on to the fourth and final game of this of the divisional round. The closest game this weekend, definitely.
Certainly the most entertaining game.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles, unfortunately, coming up short against the New Orleans Saints at a score of 20-14. Goodbye, Nick Foles. You are a hero. You are a legend. You will live forever in Philadelphia lore. We love you.
They're already working on a statue for you to put right next to Rocky.
We already have a statue up outside of the stadium. Philly forever, man. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about this game? What do you think happened? I mean, the Eagles, they came out strong. I mean, just picked off Drew Brees on the first play. I mean, we did exactly what we needed to do to come out and beat the Saints. We just couldn't keep it going.
Well, I think part of that was the Saints started out really sloppy. I mean, whenever you look at how Philadelphia scored its first touchdown, it started out with Drew Brees throwing that pick, right?
Yeah.
Well, he had, I believe it was Michael Thomas, he had him open if you look at the film, but he underthrew him and LeBlanc picked it off. And then you eventually see Nick Foles under pressure later in the drive after a couple of first downs, where you see, I believe it was a Jordan Matthews.
It was J. Matt, yeah.
Wide open, or not, he wasn't wide open, but Nick Foles under pressure, skies it, and the CB that was covering Jordan Matthews loses the ball in the air. Jordan Matthews catches it, goes straight into the end zone.
He just walks in. Yeah.
I mean, I just think the Saints started this game out really sloppy, and I don't think they could do that. I think part of that was, the Philadelphia defensive line is one of the deepest defensive lines that I've seen in a while. Even if they don't have the single best at anything. I mean, Aaron Donald's best, defensive tackle in football and stuff like that. But they have so many very talented guys on that D-line that even if someone goes down, they can still get a lot of consistent pressure. But not if everyone goes down.
No.
Not if Fletcher Cox and Michael Bennett go down.
No, that just cripples us so much. I mean, if you watch the game, you saw the difference it made. I mean, we could not get a stop against this New Orleans offense. I mean, there was a drive they had in the third quarter. It went for something like almost 12 minutes. And if you count all the penalties and everything that went on in that drive, they had a total of 112 yards gained on that singular possession. And that's just killer. Both Cox, I'm not sure if Bennett was in for that drive, but I know Cox was out. And when you see Cox come back in, he did one of the first plays he's back, he gets instant pressure through the line and blows up a screenplay. And if we had that sort of player for the entire game, who knows what could have happened?
Yeah, and I think that, the Philadelphia secondary, they're so hobbled, right? There's so many people on IR. They've been so hurt. Yet they played really inspired to start this game. Like, I know that LeBlanc was really... He made a couple of bats. Yeah, he made a couple of bats earlier that looked really good, but by the third quarter during that massive drive that you're talking about, I mean, there's just not a lot of talent there right now.
No.
So, the Eagles have been so maligned by injuries this season that you think if there were just a few people healthy, or, even, like you said, the defensive line stays healthy during this game, do they win? Maybe.
I think so. I mean,
they definitely got a fighting chance.
I mean, even with all those defensive injuries and with Michael Bennett going out, Michael Bennett, my God, for a 5th-round pick, this might be like one of the best trade deals in the history of trade deals, maybe ever.
It's great value for sure.
He's good for a splash play every game this season. He blew up Alvin Kamara in the backfield right before they kicked that field goal during the fourth quarter and made it a harder field goal to kick at 52 yards. And he missed it. He gave us a chance to go down the field and win the game. And I think we would have done that if Alshon Jeffrey caught the ball, but I can't put too much blame on him.
Yeah, that was just a tough break. It happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't happen, but what are you going to do? Even the best falter. Even Joe Flacco threw a game-sealing interception against the Patriots.
One play does not a game make. This game was really 2 games for the price of 1. I mean, you come out, Philly is red hot. They come out and score 14, just lickety-fucking split. New Orleans can't seem to get footing anywhere. And then they scored 20 unanswered.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest tales of the tape here is outside of the first quarter, we were held scoreless.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that had to do with the Saints pass rush really waking up and getting out of their own way. And after Nick Foles threw that first interception, until that last drive where it really looked like he had a serious shot of taking the lead, I think that he was off balance because a lot of that pass rush, early on he had that great play with Jordan Matthews, but a lot of his later deep throws were off the mark. Even some of his intermediate throws were off the mark, and he couldn't really... He kind of showed why you wouldn't want to give your team the key, give your team's keys to him, as opposed to someone maybe more consistent.
Exactly, and like you said with the deep balls, we really got away from what gave us success recently with Nick Foles at the helm. Where were the short passes? We couldn't get Nick Foles into a rhythm. I don't know if it was Nick Foles' fault or Doug's fault for the play calls, but Nick was just throwing the ball downfield, which is not his game all the time. I mean, sure, he's going to throw up those 50-50 balls to Alshon, and then he had that long ball to J-Matt, but Nick Foles, he kind of a dink and dunk, but I mean, it looks more impressive than a dink and dunk, but that's what it is. Like, if you really break it down. And then we just didn't see that this game, and I think it turned Nick Foles back into a pumpkin.
I mean, it's sort of like that West Coast style that, comes from the Andy Reid tree that Doug Peterson comes from, use the short passing game to, set you up and get those short yardages, just keep converting first downs. That's the kind of game they want to play, and they just weren't able to get into it.
No, and I mean, especially with this weak running game we have right now with Wendell Smallwood leading the charge.
Absolutely. He just really didn't have a shot. He just was not the right guy to take advantage of the Eagles' offensive line being strong early, which, Brandon Brooks being left out, that was probably a big reason why the pass rush got through.
Not only Brandon Brooks, but Jason Peters also left the game.
I did not know that. That explains a lot as well.
Yeah. And then, I mean, in which the short passing game for Foles can really substitute for a running game, but we just couldn't get that going. So what do you guys think about the play call right before the 2-minute warning for Doug? Do you guys think he should have done it, or was that a mistake?
The play worked, like you said. I mean, that's the thing about Doug Peterson is that I think that in his time in Philadelphia, he's really grown to be a very effective gambler. In that a lot of his gambles really paid off. Look at the Bears game. Yeah. That's another example of a gamble that paid off, even though, he kind of lucked out with, the double doink, the triple doink, actually. But he's very good at picking his spots, and I think that this was an example of it just not, another freak accident happened, Just it bounces right off of Alshon's hands. He should have caught the ball. The play worked. It was the right thing to do because now you've got more yards in a scenario where you only have so many time stoppages left, and you're closer. He catches the ball, except he didn't catch the ball.
Yeah, I don't think it was a bad call at all, and I think if Alshon catches that ball, we win the game because, it's just Nick Foles. He's going to do it again. Of course he would. But, Philadelphia fans especially will just always wonder what would have happened.
I do think that most people are in agreement that was the right call and it just wasn't executed properly.
100%.
But if people do expect that this in the future should affect his aggressiveness,
No, absolutely not. That is Doug Peterson's style. That's just the way he coaches games.
It is big balls Doug. Definitely. Forever. I don't want to see him different. It's worked out so well for us already. Well, everybody, I think that'll about wrap it up here. We will have a preview episode coming out. Was it Friday?
That'll be Friday.
Well, all right, boys and girls. Remember to tip your pizza drivers, don't run with scissors, and have a good night.